Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders. By established church leaders, my name is Josh.
My name is Sam. I'm back from spring break. Nobody cares, but we got church tonight, and I'm really excited about that.
That's good. You always put this long break between my name and your name, and I think people think, did he remember his name? But yeah, Sam knows his name. He's just thinking.
I do know my name. I'm thinking about something cutesy to say, and it doesn't always come out right.
It doesn't come out as fast as you're thinking. So, yeah, there's a gap there. Yeah, hey, I'm excited tonight.
Actually, it's the other way around. My mouth is faster than my brain. That's my problem.
Well, that's good for podcast. I'm excited about tonight. I have a meeting that's going to take. It's a small step forward in leading an established church, and so I'm really pumped about it as well. So, yeah.
Which is kind of the subject for today. We're going to be talking about traditional church campuses and whether or not they're a hurdle for guests. I'm sure there are lots of people that are listening that have some thoughts on this. I know you and I have some thoughts on this. So, hey, if you want to chime in, hit us up on the Twitters. Don't be afraid to reach out. EST Church on Twitter, or we're just in our personal accounts. So before we get into everything, certainly want to thank our sponsor church teams. They've been very good to us for a very long time, and they want to be good to you too. So don't forget to reach out to them. You can go to est.church, get their free offer. They've got a trial run. If it is a software solution, they do it. And not only do they have it, they do it well. And not only do they do it well, they've got a price that's right for you. So they have scalable systems where whether you're a large church or a small church, they have scalable pricing. So it works for everyone. You get best-in-class features, world-class technology, whether it be texting, whether it be giving, or whether it be check-in. They can do it, and they've got a whole lot more. So go to est.church to get their free trial run. Give them a call. Tell them that we sent you. That'll be helpful to us. And, hey, thank you, church teams.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an interesting topic. Sam, actually, you came up with this topic, and the idea is whether or not the traditional church building is prohibiting the church growth or, guests from coming and being included. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Sam. I think you would agree with me on this. When we talk about traditional structures, traditional buildings and campuses, I think a lot of people would look at two guys like us with our sort of perspective on ministry and our age and say, oh, I know what they're going to do. They're going to be those kind of pastors that don't want the steeples, that want the big box look and that sort of stuff. You and I have not ever discussed that, but I'll just go out on a limb here and say, I don't think steeples and columns are a problem. I don't think the traditional looking buildings are an issue really at all. That's not where I would go with this conversation. What say you on that front? Just they standing on the outside. The steeples, are they the problem?
No, I agree completely with you, and I will take it one step further. I will say that most people want a church to look like a church. Now, that's cultural and contextual, meaning,
right?
What did a church look like in frontier America? Well, it was kind of like a log cabin looking thing. What did in England in the 1500s or 1400s, what did a church look like? Well, it looks different than what we have today. But I do think that there is some value in a traditional looking campus. Let me just put it that way. I don't have a problem with the big box because it's highly efficient. And frankly, it's very expensive to build a traditional looking building now. And some might even argue it's not good stewardship. So, it's better to spend your money on missions and just put a big box there and, people are going to come anyway. Don't waste, quote, air quotes there. Don't waste your money on, traditional things that really aren't functional. So I can argue this both ways, but I actually prefer a traditional looking building myself. That's my preference. But I'm not going to say there's something wrong with a big box looking church.
Oh, of course not. I just think that people would assume that that's kind of the direction we're going. But both you and I pastor churches that have steeples and have it's a traditional looking facility. Now, the church I previously pastored, it was a big box. It didn't even have a cross on it. And it just had a big old name on the side of it, that sort of stuff. So The I am also neutral. I do think most people prefer something that looks church-esque, has some, and there's some cues that you can put into things, but yeah. But then what are we talking about here? I've got a couple of ideas, but what are some of the facilities of traditional buildings? Now that we've established that they're fine, but what are the things that maybe need to be looked at or reworked within those structures?
Well, if you pastor an established church of any size, and if you have a campus, let's just say that, likely your campus was built over the last 100 years, or at least
Hmm.
50
Hmm.
years, which means it was piecemealed together. And there's probably no clear entrance. There's
Mm,
probably most people would try, if they're brand new, if you've got four columns and a steeple like we do, you try to enter there. And that's
right.
definitely not the way you want to enter our church. You're going to end up in no man's land. There's a foyer
Yeah.
and it dead ends there. So, I think that there are some hurdles to the
Mm,
traditional church campus. Now, if you were designing one today from scratch, which there are some churches that have done that, boy, you can make them really nice. But most of us have inherited a facility that, one, has deferred maintenance, has more
mhm,
upkeep than a big box. We've got a steeple. We just painted it and sealed it up. And, it was five figures to do all that. If you've got a
mhm.
big box, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But I think that I think the hurdles are more internal than they are external. I don't think people, your guests, the unchurched, are staying away because of what the church looks like. I just, I've seen some big box churches that look just as imposing as
Mm,
four columns and a steeple.
yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you, and I love that you started on the outside. That piecemealing is a nice way to say it. I've heard people describe it as scabbed on, just where they just keep building buildings next to one another, and they're not really. There's no flow to it. It's just like they just built a building right next to it, and they knocked out a wall, and that's how you get to that building now. One of the one of the struggles or things to think through is if it was built in phases, there was likely a drive up entrance that was connected to phase one. But if, like most churches, the new sanctuary or the new entrance is phase three, four, five, something like that. So phase one's entrance is still in a lot of people's minds that are internal people. That's the entrance to the place. But like you said, that's not where you want your guests to go in. So I want this show, what I want to do is point out what needs to be thought through, but then give some ideas. You can help with those ideas with something like feather banners, those kind of things, maybe the main signage being moved over to another driveway or the way that you want them to enter. Also, on the structure itself, you could have guest parking nearer to your actual door and then a big sign. I'm a fan of the tents, like the pop-up tents, the 10 by 10 tents that are uh, have on the outside new start here, that kind of thing, and you can put that by the door, that sort of stuff. So I don't think you should, you know, chip up your old driveway or tear down your old entrance, but I do think signage helps a lot as people pull onto the campus to go, this is the direction I need to go. The entrance is this way.
Yeah, I think one of the things that helps a traditional church campus is how it's more rooted in the community, particularly a
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood church like ours. We
Mm-hmm.
have some iconic features at West Bradenton. In fact, so
Mm-hmm.
iconic that they recently made national news. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is that the LPGA was at the golf course, which is right across the street from the church. And there's a hole on the golf course that's positioned so that you can see a very clear view of the church. And it is a beautiful shot. And over again, I don't watch golf, but everyone was sending me text messages, of their TVs, like, "Hey, look
Mm-hmm.
at our church;
Mm-hmm.
it's on TV." Just
That's
and
funny.
they called it they kind of called it I think the announcers called it the new Amen corner, which is a reference to the Masters. I might have my golf wrong there, but
Hmm.
they were talking about the church, and
Yeah.
I guarantee you that if we were a big box facility that was just there, that would not be talked about. The reason it was talked about is because of the four columns, the steeple, the look of the church. It's brick, it's nice. So while there are hurdles, I do think that there is a benefit to an established look of an established church in an established neighborhood because it looks like it's supposed to be part of the community. And in that way, I think it's helpful. But hear me
Mhm.
out. No one's going to go into your church because you've got a pretty campus. That just doesn't happen. I mean, maybe every now and then somebody will show up because of visibility. People are going to show up to your church because they were invited, not
Yeah.
because of signage, not because they think that things are pretty. But it
Yeah.
does, when people do show up, I think it helps.
Yeah, it's pretty. So another thing, so if we were just going to move from the outside inward, another thing that they did not build well, or they used differently back in previous older buildings, was what we call the lobby, or that entrance area there. Now we like to have things like a guest center, and by we I mean just the modern church, a guest center, directional areas, coffee bars, those kind of things that are just real greeting and environment. And I like them. They warm up the space, that sort of stuff. But a lot of your traditional structures, especially the older structures, they had very small atriums or lobby spaces. And those lobby spaces maybe had a couple restrooms off to the sides, a water fountain, and then doors that went just straight into the sanctuary. I mean, there was no kind of like blocking of light or sound or escape of air. So those smaller areas there were an issue or do create issues for people. Sam, what's some ideas on how to, let's say you've got one of those structures, what could you do to help with that problem?
Well, we had that very problem at West Bradenton, and we actually gutted a middle part of the building and made a lobby. And it was cheaper than building one on the exterior. And we needed the parking anyway. We really couldn't, we were already limited on parking. We did not need to take up
Mm.
any more parking spaces to build another building. So we've got 4.5 acres. We have 62,000 square feet on 4.5 acres to give you an idea of what we're
Wow.
dealing with at West Bradenton.
I'm going to ask while
Yeah.
you're talking on what we have here.
Teeny tiny little bit of land
Hmm.
and a fairly large camp. Not giant. It's not a giant campus, but it's a fairly large campus that's 3 stories. They built up, thankfully, instead of building out.
Mm.
But we gutted a middle section of the church between two buildings where breezeways used to be, connected all the breezeways, made them under air, put a roof over them, and then put a lobby or what we call a commons area in the middle of the church. Now, it's still hard to figure out how to get in there because we have, I
Mm.
think, 38 exterior doors. You pastor an established
Hmm.
church when you have 38 legitimate exterior doors.
Wow.
And
That's just
oh,
a lot.
by the way, they all used to have their own locks, and there was a
Of
key
course
for
they
each
did.
one.
Of course they did.
So, yeah, there's certainly hurdles for the established church or the traditional church campus. The look, I don't think, is one of them, but the footprint can be. And if people walk in and they get lost, that's
Mm.
not a good first impression.
Yeah.
So, your signage, once people are on the campus, your signage does become important. That
Yeah.
commons area does become important. And we work very hard to try to funnel people where they need to go, particularly away from the kids' hall because of child
Mm.
safety issues. And that's a whole nother discussion. A lot of newer churches are built with child safety issues in mind. A lot of
Yeah.
older churches were built long before people were even thinking about that. In fact, we used to put the kids on the third floor in like rooms the size of closets because the
Yeah.
kids are small. Of course, they can meet in closets. But
Kids are tiny.
now, now they're down on the first floor, thankfully, and they take up just about the entire first floor because we've got a growing kids ministry.
Yeah.
But I do think
I
there's
would,
some hurdles, but I don't think that it's the facade. I think it's more the footprint than anything
yeah.
else.
I think circling back to the small lobby, I've seen a couple of churches in places with mild weather. What they'll do is just open up, put some indoor outdoor space, build out the area in front, make it more inviting, more stand around, maybe knock out some of the stairs and and I've seen water features, just those kind of things. I think that's smart. Put in green space right there in front of the church. That's a cool move. Another move that I've seen in a lot of these traditional structures is really small lobbies. Then you walk into the sanctuary and there's a large section that's under the balcony. Then there's a section that is the floor, what's called the floor. I've seen churches remove the pews or the chairs, the seating that's under the balcony, and convert a lot of that into lobbies. Even if you don't build a wall, they'll put a guest connection center there. So you just open up all the doors and it brings the people in. Guests are bringing them in. That's using space there. There's a benefit to that because you maybe don't need all of that seating currently. And so that helps to push the people towards the front. And I agree with you. The footprint of the structure is a challenge. So whereas signage, like you mentioned, is very good, and I know that you guys have great first impressions team and greeters. Those become invaluable because it's not obvious where you need to go. So that's why I always advocate for a very obvious starting point, and then from there you can use first impression team or get greeters to walk people to the next location if they should need to be walked there. So signage is valuable. First impressions are valuable. You mentioned something there that is very commonly a problem in traditional structures: very small rooms. I'm talking small. I've seen rooms that are designated as adult Sunday school classes that you'd be hard pressed to put 10 normal sized humans in that room
We have
around
them at
chairs.
West Bradenton.
Yeah.
We have
So
them.
what do you do with that? How do we fix that? Knock walls out?
We've knocked walls out. We've done that. We've actually made 3 rooms into one. They were that
Yeah.
small.
Right. I've
Um,
seen that.
we have a lot of different sized rooms. That's actually helpful with groups because we have some groups that are 60, 70 strong, and then we have
Hmm.
some groups that are 4 or 5. So if you're a group of 4 or 5, guess what? You're going to be in a little smaller room than the group of 50. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think having some different sized classrooms is actually beneficial. But if you have all small classrooms,
Hmm.
that becomes a limiting factor for growth in your groups, particularly if you have an on-site group strategy, which most traditional churches do. Um, but if you can knock out some walls, I think it's a good way to go. We've done that, and for a lot of times, it's not too terribly expensive because actually many of those walls were put up. They're not load-bearing walls.
Right. I would say a couple of strategies to work on if that's the situation that you're in. It's funny how often I'll go into an established church campus and they'll have the older structure, our Sunday school, the oldest structure is the sanctuary usually. And then the children's space and the adult education space are these very small rooms. And the newest structure is more of like an office wing. And because staff developed and that sort of stuff. And it's ironic, nobody ever notices this, but the offices are often much larger than these tiny small group rooms. And particularly the pastor's suite. He'll have this big desk and these wall to wall shelves and an outer room that can sit whatever, like couches and stuff, and then a library sometimes, a conference room, his own restroom. I was at a church, I was a pastor of a church one time where my office suite as the pastor would make 2 really good size small group rooms. And so I just led the church to move all the offices over to the tiny rooms. And then we turn those rooms into, or the offices into, small group space. So sometimes if you just blank slate it, step back, I know we've always officed over here. I know we've always had Sunday school over there. But what if we didn't? What if we flipped it? Another strategy that you mentioned with those large 75 are, you could go to master teacher format for some divisions, and maybe like in a fellowship hall, a gym, maybe an unused, unfinished balcony sort of situation. I've seen where there you can fit 100 people or whatever 50 people around tables, have a master teacher, and then table discussion. That would allow for growth without cramming people into smaller rooms. So those are 2 strategies to get around this small area there. What else?
Yeah, I've seen old balconies utilized. By
Hmm.
the way, Brown Church Development Group is a good one to call. What they do a lot of the retrofitting sort of stuff with established churches,
Yeah.
and you were talking earlier about how um, churches are taking space in the worship space and making that common space. That's actually a very common thing that they do. It's one of the more
Oh, cool.
normative things that they are doing now is renovating existing space and adding common
Hmm.
space. So, Brown Church Development Group, they're a partner of Church Answers, churchdevelopment.net. They're a good one to call. Many years ago, I did some research. So it's dated at this point. I mean, goodness, I want to say it's 15 years ago. But I did a very large project for some church builders. And they just had some basic questions about church facilities. And we found that your guests, a couple of things. One, the sanctuary is the most important space to a guest. The
Hmm.
commons area is the second most important. Clean children's area is the third most important. I don't think that's going to surprise anyone, but I want you to know there's data to support that.
Okay.
Having a good commons area, having a really nice worship space, and having children's areas that are clean and secure are top of the line priorities. Now, granted, the research is about 15 years old, but I think that you would find roughly the same sort of data
Hmm.
today. But you know what was last on the list in terms of priorities for the unchurched? So these are perspectives of the unchurched on the church facility.
Last on the
What was
list.
last?
Coffee bar.
Nope. Nope. Gymnasium.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It does, because they're not going to church thinking about the
Mm-mm.
gymnasium.
They're not.
Um,
No. But churches
and
will
it's
spend a
it's
lot of money. It was really popular late 90s to get that FLC. You know what I'm talking about? You got to build
Family
the
Life
FL.
Center.
Yeah, you build that with a tracker around the top and a room with donated weights that no one is ever going to use. But yeah, that was a thing.
So gyms are less about first impressions and more about strategy when you're
Sure.
talking facility.
Hmm. Hmm.
Your gym, if you're going to renovate your space, renovate your gym for ministry, whatever
Mm.
that may be.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily an area that you need to be concerned about first impressions, but it is critically important for strategic ministry, which is what Upper does, by the way.
Yep.
Sponsor. Little
Yeah.
segue there.
It's a great thing
Thankful.
to use. Hey, I will say restrooms are a thing that we just let slide. It's something that churches don't really pay a lot of attention to. And you end up having your guests in restrooms that are just dirty or they're not they were built at a different time where things looked differently. And so, if you can, of course, it needs to be down the list. The sanctuary needs to have good AVL. If the lobby needs to be warm and welcoming, but I would say right around that, if you could at least clean them up, go ahead and replace the commodes and the urinals and the sinks and replace those things out. They're not that pricey, and you can get somebody to help paint the walls. I've seen volunteers pull the dividers out that are metal, to pull them out, get some of that rust off of it, repaint them, and install them. And yeah, you'd rather have new ones, but that looks way way better. So your restrooms need some TLC if you're able to do that, because I think it makes an impression. People go in there, and if your restrooms are dirty, I think it implies that you're not really taking care of the back end stuff. That's what I think that kind of communicates that well.
You know what our strategy is at West Bradenton when it comes to bathrooms?
Hold it until you get home.
No.
Oh,
We have a bathroom for every decade of the last 60 years. So if you want a bathroom from the 1960s, we have that. 70s, we have that. 80s, we have that. 90s and 2000s. And then most recently, we have some very new
yeah.
bathrooms as well. So whatever era of Florida bathroom, if you want pink tile with green, we have it.
That's funny.
That's actually something that, oh man, we've just been chipping away at that. Don't get me started on our bathrooms.
Yeah.
Actually, you did, and
Yeah.
you're exactly right. We are behind, pun
Mhm.
intended, on our bathrooms.
Finally, the last thing that I'll add to the conversation on traditional facilities is green space or outdoor space. I've seen these churches that they concreted everything up. They just did. And there may be some logic to, and I know it's going to cost money. If you have the money to do this, think about doing this. Maybe go ahead and tear down that old building that you're not letting anybody meet in anymore. Just tear it down, get it out of there, and put a park there. I've seen churches with massive parking lots. They needed them at one point. They don't need that much parking at this point. So go through and every 10 or 15, just cut out the parking, cut out the concrete, and plant a tree, and just put some grass there, plant a tree. It will, the greenness, I think there's a lot, especially with millennials and young adults, they don't want to go to something that just feels like a giant scabbed on old building. And green space, just caring for the grass and the trees that you do have, can go a very, very long way. And so that naturey feel to things, trees in the lobby, plants that are planted well, those kind of things, you can get volunteers to do this and donate it. I just think it's a traditional thing that gets overlooked in space. Thankfully, the campus I'm at is just beautiful. I asked one of our guys while you were talking, because I was curious. We have 176,000 square feet buildings on 20 acres. So this is a massive structure that is.
So you're five times as big as we are. To give you an idea.
And it's all just, there's 2 stories, but it's pretty much just all flat. Just this big, long, huge building.
Your building's about 3 times as bigger. Your campus is 5 times as bigger. And every time I see a big parking lot, you talk about tearing up parking lots and putting trees down. Every time I see a big parking lot, I get jealous. I get really, really jealous.
I'm going to send you a screenshot of ours so you can get jealous. So yeah,
I'll have parking lot envy. I can't help it.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks to our sponsor, Upward. Upward Sports is the best solution that you can have to get your people thinking outward and reaching neighbors. They help you get a self-sustaining sports ministry going. So you don't have to be a sports fanatic, but most people like sports, and it's an awesome way to meet the neighbors. So this is, they help you use sports as a bridge into your community. You want to get families in your church, Upward is a good way to go. They're offering this 2024 sports startup grant of $500. Don't know how much longer they're going to be able to do that. So go to upward.org/churchanswers. Tell them we sent you. Tell them EST sent you. And you can get that $500 sports startup grant. And Upward Sports, we certainly thank you for sponsoring today's episode.
That's right. And we thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope that this message or this episode was helpful to you, and that you have some ideas about to rethink through your campus so that you can grow and people can hear about Jesus. That's all the time we have right now. So we will catch you next week.
Upward Sports equips churches to run self-sustaining sports ministries in their communities. Whether you're a sports fanatic or on staff at a church, Upward Sports will give you all the tools you need to run a first-class sports ministry that allows you to reach families in your community. Upward Sports offers basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, and softball through league and camp offerings. At Upward Sports, we want to help your church make a difference and give you increased opportunities to share the gospel. Learn more today at upward.org/churchanswers.